Hello guys, TYT has technical issues, so you got that. Now, I had to stand by.
doing a full hour on the Orlando situation and some of the wider context of the violence that happened in Orlando, the legislative options going forward, some of the ways that you can help out in that situation, and more. So joining me for that hour, and experienced Vidor, Michael Shore. Glad to have all of you guys here for this show.
No drink.
Okay, well, why don't we jump right into it? There's a lot of different aspects of this situation that we want to break down. Early Sunday morning, the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida, was the site of the worst mass shooting and the worst act of homophobic terrorism in U.S. history. We're going to break down all the facts for you. Nearly 50 people were killed, more than 50 were wounded during a siege that lasted more than 3 hours. The gunman, who was later killed by police, entered the club with an assault-type rifle, a handgun, and a device after engaging in a shootout with officers working off-duty outside of Pulse, a nightclub. He began shooting at 2 a.m., and his siege of the nightclub lasted for 3 hours until police were able to enter, during a period in which dozens of individuals were trapped inside of the club, hoping to be rescued as the siege went on. At around 6 a.m. Eastern, it was reported that the gunman was dead. Later, police confirmed the shooter was killed by SWAT. Police officials said they made the decision to go inside and engage the gunman because they were being contacted by people who were hiding in the bathroom and were wounded. They rescued 30 people who were inside the club with the gunman. As we said earlier, nearly 50 dead, 50 including the gunman. Officials had said that the dead numbered 50, but clarified that later that they were including the gunman in that number. And around midday today, Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi said that families of at least 36 out of 49 victims have been notified of their loved ones' deaths. And one of the, I think, personally most horrific parts of this that I saw was a text message conversation between one of the people who's trapped and their mother, and that person ended up dying. Mm-hmm. And so absolutely horrendous that they only got to send a couple of messages before they were finally killed. And now, during the siege, the shooter did communicate with police on the outside. He also called 911 to pledge allegiance to ISIS during the attack, and was possibly planning to carry out the massacre at the Orlando Gay Club for a long time. He had attempted to buy military-grade body armor from a local store in recent weeks, according to a U.S. official. Thankfully, police at the store refused to sell him what is known as Level 3 body armor, which offers more protection than the body armor police typically issue to officers. He'd also legally purchased a Glock pistol and a long gun, which has been only identified as AR-15 styled. And finally, FBI Director James Comey said today that there is no evidence that the shooter's plot was directed from outside the U.S., with President Obama calling him an example of the kind of homegrown extremism that all of us have been so concerned about. So obviously a very devastating attack following the day after the death of singer Christina Grimmie. An absolutely horrendous, but not too atypical weekend in American recent history.
Yeah, I mean, the story is the most brutal, case of a mass shooting in U.S. history. The most number of victims in a mass shooting in U.S. history. And every year it seems like, there's a new mass shooting that takes that title. And it's scary because with this story you see a similar trend. You have our polarized political situation where people like to stick to their talking points, go to their corners, and just continue regurgitating those talking points. And we don't seem to really learn from what we've experienced in the past. There are never any real solutions. There's only questionable vitriol, questionable rhetoric, and it's very understandable to feel helpless in this moment. I know I feel helpless.
Yeah. Listen, I mean, comparing them, you compare them by number, you compare them by when they happen, and how frequently they happen. I mean, Newtown, remember, we all thought that was going to be the one that got us past the inaction and inertia on this issue. It was kids. It was little kids. It was just brutal and nothing. And then we just get inured to it, and it keeps happening and happening. And here we are in Orlando, right? What do we think of when we think of Orlando, right? We think of Disney and happiest place on earth, and it's a terrible thing. But what is so terrible is what you just pointed out, is that nobody does anything ever, and you have to rely on Congress, and you have to look and say, how in the world? Yesterday, Igor Volsky was who everybody should follow, at Igor Volsky, IGORVOLSKY, was taking every tweet that
a congressman was tweeting, a member of Congress was tweeting, and they were saying, "Our thoughts and prayers are with you," which of course is a nice thing to say. It's sort of the reflex thing you say. Volsky was retweeting that tweet and saying how much each of these people had taken from the National Rifle Association in donations to keep them silent on the issues of preventing handguns, of preventing assault weapons, preventing this. And until that happens, it's not going to change. Until, it goes back to what everybody talks about all the time at this desk, which is money and politics. And until the influence of the National Rifle Association is minimized, this is going to continue to happen.
Yeah, go ahead. This is part of that fairy dust that people talk about when they talk about Bernie Sanders, fairy dust and all that stuff.
That didn't take long.
And unicorns, because this is exactly this is that. I mean, you just kind of said it. I'm just kind of reiterating what you're saying is that, the money in politics, we have a government that's responsive to donors and not to voters.
Yeah.
And when we say we have to get the NRA money out, we have to get money out of our politics, right? And so, that's not just some high-minded idea that we all wish we could have someday, right? That's a thing we absolutely need, because if you don't get money out of politics, people die, right? And this is what's happening, right? We have kids, we had 20 kids, children shot, massacred. Now we have 50 adults massacred. So it doesn't seem to matter how horrible this is, because when money's in politics, that's what's going to win the day. We shouldn't be marginalizing that idea or pretending like we can take money and it doesn't affect us.
Yeah.
And we need to stop doing that. We need to stop allowing our politicians to say that. To say, hey, I can take money and I can regulate and I can do. No, you can't. You can't do that. So when when they say that stuff, we need to hold their feet to the fire and just say that's patently not true. You cannot take money from special interests and then legislate without that in mind. So that's just stop saying that. Okay, we all know that money in politics is the thing that's corrupting politics. It's why that guy was able to go get an AR-15 style gun right now. It's why he was legally able to go purchase that body armor. While he was legal, so it's all completely legal. This is the system that money in politics is bought. Okay, so I'm just saying I think we all need to stop allowing politicians to say I can take money and I can still do my job, because you can't. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, luckily he wasn't able to purchase that body armor, which, by the way, as John had pointed out, would have been even more powerful than the body armor we give our police.
Yeah.
But another thing I wanted to mention is, yes, this absolutely has to do with, political corruption, and the main reason why these mass shootings happen in this country over and over again, and they get worse every time, and nothing ever gets done in the form of, ensuring that there are background checks and ensuring that there's common sense gun legislation that could prevent something like this from happening in the future. He had been investigated by the FBI on 2 separate occasions, and he was still able to legally purchase these firearms. But another thing that I want to mention is this shooting touches on so many ills in our, social ills in the country, right? Not only does it have to do with political corruption, it also has to do with gay intolerance, bigotry, right? Which you see quite a bit, especially with all the stories we've been covering recently with the transgender bathroom laws, right? So a lot of conservatives are coming out and they're saying, look, we need to point to radical Islamic terrorism, right? Which, by the way, I think that it's fine to talk about homegrown terrorism, because that's exactly what happened with this U.S.-born citizen who was radicalized and did what he did. But you also have to talk about the type of gay intolerance that you see among many conservatives in the United States, whether, they follow Islam or any other religion. That type of rhetoric needs to change. That type of ideology needs to change. You can't be a conservative and mourn the deaths of these individuals when you've been spouting hate toward these groups of people for decades at this point.
Yeah. I want to turn in a second to President Obama's comments, a brief part of his comments on this. I just wanted to respond to something Michael said about the thoughts and prayers, which we obviously see. And I engage in all the sorts of the same useless Twitter comments that you always have. The thoughts and prayers seems like a nice thing to do, but it's not a nice thing to do if what you're doing is falsely implying that that's the best you can do. Regular people send thoughts and prayers because that is literally the best that they can do, is lend moral support to people who are suffering. But if you're a politician, that's a lie. It's not the best you can do. You can change the situation. You're choosing not to. Now let's go to video 5, where you're going to see Barack Obama talking about some of the false narratives that are popping up as a result of this shooting.
my concern is that we start getting into a debate, as has happened in the past, which is an either-or debate. And the suggestion is either we think about something as terrorism and we ignore the problems with easy access to firearms, or it's all about firearms and we ignore the very real role that organizations like ISIL had in generating extremist views inside this country. It's not an either-or, it's a both and.
And of course, he lent support to the victims and their families, as you would expect. And we're going to talk a little bit more later on in the show about what could possibly be done legislatively as a result of this. But I do want to give you a brief idea of something that you can do. We're going to talk at the close of the show with blood donations, which is, of course, something that is necessary, especially considering some of the discrimination that we still have in our system as a result of that. But a GoFundMe campaign has been set up for the victims and their families. And so if we could bring up graphic 29, you're going to see an image of that. That's something that you can easily find. Obviously, it's already raising a great deal of money, but it's something that you can do to help support them. It's at gofundme.com/pulsevictimsfund. That is one way that you could help out some of those who are still suffering, still waiting for information about what actually happened. But we're going to turn now to the background of the individual who committed this act of terrorism. Here's what we know so far about the background of the Orlando nightclub shooter. He was born in New York to Afghan immigrant parents. We are going to not say his name. We're not going to show his picture. We have no interest in idolizing or helping those who would idolize shooters of this sort, but we will give you information to help in our analysis of what happened and what we should do going forward. His ex-wife, Satori Yusufi, described a brief but violent relationship to a mentally ill man whom she was only able to escape from through her family's help. He was bipolar, physically abusive, and a steroid abuser, she said. That was his earlier wife. He went on to marry again afterward and have a child. He was described by a former police officer that he'd worked alongside as an angry person, violent in nature, and a bigot to almost every class of person. He was also, people have made multiple references to him making many homophobic comments, violently homophobic comments, in the years prior to the actual shooting. Now, he first came on the FBI's radar back in 2013 when he made inflammatory comments to coworkers alleging possible terrorist ties. Investigators were unable to verify the substance of his comments. And so he gave some indication even back then, 3 years ago, that he had some ties to terrorist organizations, but not enough to actually have him be convicted of anything. Then the next year, the FBI interviewed him again over possible connections with Moner Mohammed Abu Salha, a Florida man who became the first known American suicide bomber in Syria. Ronald Hopper, who was the assistant special agent in charge of that investigation, said that we determined the contact was minimal. It did not constitute a substantive relationship or threat at that time. Now, that seems tragic in hindsight. But that's exactly the sort of situation that we should expect would have happened. He's a guy who is boasting about ties to terrorists. He has gone to mosques where he has come into contact with these people. And certainly ISIS has said that one of their soldiers committed this attack. But we have no information about him traveling overseas and training with them, any direction being offered internationally from ISIS or its agents. It seems like an incredibly insane, violent domestic abuser with bipolar disorder who hated gay people for whatever reason, and certainly we can speculate. And when an individual like that, every person wants to believe that they're part of something bigger, that what they believe is part of something bigger. That's one of the reasons that religion is so popular throughout human history. And so when you see this great shining star of hatred internationally like ISIS, then a guy who was already crazy, already violent, already hated homosexuals, suddenly has larger authorization to do something about it, or confirmation that he was always right, whether he actually ever contacted ISIS or not. That's what it seems like to me.
So what's interesting about this whole story is the fact that not only was he investigated on 2 separate occasions by the FBI for possibly having ties to terrorist activities, or at least being radicalized in the country, he had an ex-wife who even wrote a police report about how abusive he was. And he was still able to get guns. So whenever Edward Snowden leaked the information about how the NSA is indiscriminately spying on all of us, there were arguments in support of what the government was doing. Because, hey, this is national security. You got to keep us safe from these radical terrorists, right? Which, okay, I understand that argument, but here's what happens, okay? They indiscriminately collect information on innocent Americans like us, and then people like the shooter fall through the cracks. How do you investigate this person on 2 separate occasions and on top of that, have a police report indicating that he was very abusive to his wife, and he's still able to purchase an AR-15. I just don't understand. I don't understand. So if you genuinely care about terrorism, and you genuinely are worried about radical Islamic terrorists in the country, then please think about the laws that we have in place right now that makes it easy for these individuals to buy firearms. Please.
Yeah, I mean, it seems fairly obvious. I understand that right now, people who are irrationally devoted to guns and believe that there should be effectively no limits on what they can do, are already, as soon as they see that a shooting like this has happened, the NRA stops tweeting, they go into their hunker down mode, and considering how many shootings we have recently, soon they might have to literally cancel their Twitter account if that's going to be their policy, and many will immediately rise to defending. They go on Twitter not to express empathy, but to defend the rights of gun owners. If you say that you want to kill people, and you're part of a terrorist organization, then your right to have a gun should be taken away for the rest of your life. We will lock you up if you yell fire in a crowded theater, because we understand that the right to free speech has limits. The right to gun ownership has limits. And if you say that you want to kill people, then you don't have the right anymore to have a gun, or you shouldn't have that right any longer.
It's absurd that it's more difficult to purchase Sudafed than it is to get your hands on a firearm in this country. It's absurd. Okay,
or that you can be banned from flying on a plane, which Obama's going to talk about in a video.
Right, and also for all the, people in Middle America who are adamant about ensuring that there's no gun control at all, I just want you to be clear about something. The Second Amendment, according to your interpretation, doesn't only apply to white individuals living in Middle America. It applies to all American citizens, all Americans, okay? So everyone can get their hands on a gun. People who are fighting to ensure that those on a terrorist watch list get their hands on a gun. I mean, you're part of the problem. I don't see how there could possibly be a good argument in favor of allowing someone on a terrorist watch list to obtain a gun.
But it's the ease, too, at every level.
Yes.
I mean, terrorist watch list is the exclamation point on it. But to talk about what John was just saying, there's a congressman named Andy Holt out of Tennessee. I don't know what district number he represents, but he's in Tennessee, 6th district, I think. He's having a fundraiser tomorrow, and he was going to be giving away an AR-15. You could win that at his fundraiser for Congress. Well, it turns out that was the gun that was used yesterday, and he's still going to use it. He's still going to give it away. They're still giving that away. He is standing behind. He said it's about the person, not the gun. This whole mentality, this control that guns in the extreme have. And one of the most striking things, and I learned this today, I remembered hearing it once, but there is the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, which studied the amount of gun violence in this country. That's what they were charged with. Until 1996, when the NRA said to their people in Congress, don't let them study the statistics of gun violence anymore.
Yes.
They stopped doing it in 1996. Mm-hmm. It's been like a self-imposed ban since then. They're not even allowed to do it because the NRA said that it would promote gun control. So they're not even allowed to tell you. So those numbers that you hear, how many killings, how many this, how many that, those are all approximations because the CDC, the only agency that would have the real money to do that, is banned by Congress from doing and reporting it.
I don't think that the CDC should investigate infectious disease because that might promote vaccines.
Yeah, well, that's true, but they would like that because that's the drug companies.
Exactly.
So, and let's remember that this will not do anything to move gun legislation. After the San Bernardino murders, right? Well, how many people were murdered? 14?
I think it was 14 in that case.
2 weeks after that, they had a vote to see if they could ban people who are on terrorist watch lists from buying guns. And the Republicans voted it down 55 to 44, something like that. And only one Republican senator crossed the line, though. This is a government of donors, not voters. This is the real problem. We don't, incremental change is not going to fix this problem. This is not going to go away. This will be with us for decades. This is not going away. Until we get money out of politics and return our government to the people, the voters, and not the donors, every problem will be effed up like this. This is climate change. This is half of our government denying science about climate change, for F's sake. This is all about money and the corrupting, and you think we could, around the edges, we can fix things? We can't. And we have a fundamentally broken system.
I want to say a little bit more about the background of the shooter, just so that we make sure that you get this. According to his has a controversial YouTube channel where he advocates for the overthrow of the Afghan government and wishes to become a part of the government of the Taliban.
Yeah, I would.
But this is a hate-fueled thing. One last comment, because there are people who their only driving issue is absolute hatred for Muslims. That's their mission. That's all that they do, and some of them even have a few Twitter followers and a bunch that they bought. And so they try to advocate for that message. And so many of them were trying to say their battle that they wanted to wage was, this was an Islamic terrorist, not a right-wing terrorist. I got news for you. He didn't shoot up a gay club because he was so pro-environment or so pro-animal rights. He cared about the rights of chimpanzees. He's a fucking right-winger, motivated by hatred, as a lot of other extremist right-wingers are. He just also happens to be Muslim. But no, he fits into both categories.
So,
Kim on that count.
related to that, it's not in this hour, but in the second hour of the show, we're going to talk about how police in Santa Monica, California, foiled a terror plot by a white individual who was planning on going to the Gay Pride Parade in West Hollywood with a small arsenal of his own. So, right-wing terrorism is a serious problem. And look, for his father to say that he wasn't fueled by religion enrages me because, first of all, he was fueled by his hatred of gay people, which comes from religious beliefs, right? And that religious belief is not unique to one religion. His father acts as though, like, oh, how could this have happened? Like, what? We did not expect this. Well, the same guy is talking about how, don't do anything to hurt gay people right now because God will punish them. God will torture them. That ideology is part of your religion, okay? And so there are some who ignore that part of their religion and they use their religion for good, and then there are those who use extreme, parts of the doctrine in order to carry out acts of violence. That's what happened in this case. And for anyone who's concerned about domestic terrorism, who's worried about, refugees coming into this country and radicalizing people or causing terrorist, activity here, okay, I hear you. I hear that you're concerned about that. We've had a number of mass shootings at this point. But if you're genuinely concerned, let's make it harder for those people to legally obtain weapons. How about that?
Yeah. Good. So I'm just reminded of all the Mike Huckabee and every other right-winger standing on stage with Kim Davis at a rally for gay hate. Yeah, and so that's okay to have a rally for gay hate repeatedly, right? When someone's denying gays their rights, their constitutional rights, you guys rally around denying them. And so, but this guy's just this guy must be a maniac, right? But it's okay to hate them, and they're not fully citizens, and they don't deserve the rights, and God's going to punish them. Again, and then Donald Trump, by the way, is revealing the hypocrisy and the moral bankruptcy of that movement, the right-winger movement, because they don't give a shit about morality, they don't give a shit about the Bible, they don't give a shit about anything.
They don't give a shit about human lives. Let's just keep it real. Right. They care about exploiting a tragedy like this for political gain.
Yes.
Okay? Someone like Donald Trump does not genuinely care about the victims, and his rhetoric online has made that absolute current system that we're living in. You wouldn't go call in on all these cable news shows and spout your hatred for certain groups of people, spout your allegiance for the NRA. You are a disgrace. Donald Trump is an embarrassment to the United States and an embarrassment to the Republican Party, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a little bit on Donald Trump. So why don't
I just say one thing about Michael? This is Mike Huckabee's tweet yesterday. That's it. Please join Janet and me in praying for the victims of the Orlando attack and their families. That's the same guy who stood up there, as Jimmy just said, with Kim Davis. Go take it away. Go away with that, Mike Huckabee. I mean, this is you spewed hate. You spewed hate. No, don't. And you wrap it in, then we wouldn't be able to get gyms like this. But
and you wrap it in morality,
right? Yeah. And you wrap it in morality. The other thing, it's Andy Holt is a state representative from the 6th district, and not a U.S. representative. Yeah.
Okay. Let's turn to Donald Trump and some of the things that he said. President Barack Obama, Bernie Sanders, and Hillary Clinton have all both expressed empathy and sympathy for the victims of the Orlando shooting and their families, but they've also, much more importantly, pushed for legislative changes that would actually stop these sorts of attacks from happening in the future. So that's on the Democratic side. But on the Republican side, the highest profile Republican currently, Donald Trump, hasn't been able to say almost anything that's not incredibly offensive to those grieving today. He also hasn't been able to say anything even remotely accurate. So I want you to watch this video and how little he feels he needs to know about the shooting before talking about it on the news or tweeting about it, as he so often does.
If you had guns on the other side, you wouldn't have had the tragedy that you had. If people in that room
But there
had
was,
guns,
I mean, but
with
Mr.
the
Trump,
bullets
there was
flying
an
in the
armed,
opposite
there was
direction,
an armed
right at
security
him,
guard.
right at his head, you wouldn't have had the same tragedy that you ended up having, and nobody even knows how bad that tragedy is. But if you had guns in that room, even if you had a number of people having them strapped to their ankle or strapped to their waist, where bullets could have flown in the other direction right at them, you wouldn't have had the same kind of a tragedy.
So, obviously, his overall message is 100% accurate. Thankfully, the reporter attempting to get him to realize what reality was and to come back to it, but he refused to. And the reporter in that case was right. The uniformed off-duty police officer working security at the club responded. He and two other officers exchanged gunfire with the suspect, according to officials. This was right outside as the guy was working his way into the club. 3 people with guns, bullets flying at him, as Donald Trump would say, and that did not stop 50 people from being killed because, of course, the guy had an assault rifle.
49, because you don't want to count.
Right, 49, yes, and over 50 injured. The way that he talks about these sorts of events, first of all, he betrays how little interest he has in the actual facts by saying nobody even knows how bad it is. He always comes back to that on everything that's a mess, everything that's a disaster. Nobody knows, nobody understands, because he doesn't know and he doesn't understand, and he didn't care enough to actually find out anything about what was happening in this before talking about it. The simple fact that there were 3 off-duty officers who attempted, at risk to their own lives while working security, to stop this man. So he has totally pushed them into the shadows. They don't matter. He doesn't care about them. So that he can continue to spread this entirely false misconception that he always goes back to, that if only there were more people firing bullets at each other, that there would never be any evil in the world.
Yeah, and on a day in which he revokes, he's constantly revoking the press credentials from the Des Moines Register to the Huffington Post. Today, the Washington Post just had their press credentials revoked. So he is such an adherent to the Second Amendment. Anything for the Second Amendment. When it comes to the First Amendment, well, we're going to draw the line there.
Yeah.
So the hypocrisy is even subtle. You know, sometimes it's as overt as we just saw. Sometimes it is so subtle because he's latching onto these guns. Imagine if people had guns in their ankles, or what did he say?
Ankles or their waists.
Or their waists.
Even if they had them on their ankles or their waist.
Yeah, like that would stop. These people go into these. Yeah, he is a deranged mind, and we didn't even talk about mental illness as it comes into this. And I know you didn't omit it because you've forgotten about it because we talked about it. It just didn't come into play yet in this tragedy. But there's something off with this guy, and I think that may be his undoing.
That may be the understatement of the year. That there's something off with this guy.
No, but that's true. But understatement is kind of classic.
It is classic.
Yeah.
I'll give it to you. And look, so the first thing he tweeted about this, he was acting as a news outlet. He had plagiarized from someone else's tweet about the facts. Someone put them side to side. It's the exact thing with a couple of misspellings on Trump's part about what had actually happened. And then, imagine it's President Trump, and this sort of attack happens. How would he respond? Would there be even a glimmer of hope that some sort of law would change?
It wouldn't matter how he would respond because there would only be 2 people in the press room. So
we wouldn't know how he responded, actually, yes. Well, he would tweet about it, certainly. Okay, so let's play video 3, where he shows he gets so much credit for being different from other Republicans. Let's take a look and see how different he is.
What I want them to do is be tough and vigilant. Our government, we're led by a man that is we're led by a man that either is not tough, not smart, or he's got something else in mind. And the something else in mind, people can't believe it. People cannot believe that President Obama is acting the way he acts and can't even mention the words radical Islamic terrorism. There's something going on. It's inconceivable. There's something going on.
I just don't get it. First of all, he's not specific about anything except for Obama doesn't say radical Islamic terrorism. By the way, he addressed terrorism in his speech after the shooting. Okay, let's all say it in unison. Radical Islamic terrorism. Let's say it again.
Sure.
Radical Islamic terrorism. Oh my God, a solution. No, it doesn't fucking work like that. You need real solutions. You can't say that you're worried about radical Islamic terrorism and then in the same breath argue, well, we got to make sure that people on the terrorist watch list have access to guns because just because they're on a list, we can't take their constitutional rights away. Then you're not genuinely threatened by radical Islamic terrorism. If you're not fighting against these laws, okay, you're not generally threatened. What you're really concerned about is how much you fucking hate Muslims, and so you just want to talk about that and how much you want to ban them. If you're genuinely worried about radical Islamic terrorism in the United States, you would ensure that it's more difficult for people to get a gun, especially if they're on a terrorist watch list. They're so disingenuous. It's all about exploiting a tragedy for political gain, and it fucking disgusts me.
Yeah, they've never once expressed, and there are idiots on both sides that believe that somehow magically this is the cure. I love Harry Potter. They've watched it too much if they think that words have this magical ability to change reality. By simply saying this, well, clearly if we call it that, they won't be able to. They won't just go and buy an AR-15 and shoot up a place as they have been every couple of months. He also went on to say that the solution is going to be more bombing in the Middle East. So that's cool.
That's
that
worked really well for us so far, by the way.
I think that if you bomb the Middle East, then people who are sympathetic to ISIS here will be cowed. I think they won't want to do anything if you just bomb the Middle East. But that's what he actually thinks. And so the solution from this maverick, who is so different than the other Republicans, is to call it radical Islamic terrorism and bomb as many people as you can in the Middle East. Now, granted, he would add bring guns to clubs, which isn't a bad idea when people are drinking and tensions are high. And also, he would kill the family members of suspected terrorists. So suspected terrorists in America should be able to be given guns. Suspected
Islamic terrorism. I'm gonna give you back. Appreciate it, but I don't need it. I was right about it. Look what they did to the Twin Towers. Appreciate the congrats. That's what he fucking starts. Appreciate the congrats.
and then later, I called it. I called it. He made the bold prediction that there would be terrorist attacks in the world.
And he's bold, very bold. And he said that I want toughness and vigilance. We must be smart. You know, it's so inspiring when a draft-dodging rich kid tells us to be tough and vigilant.
Yeah, I read today.
I would be tough, but I have a bone spur. I would be tougher.
Obama's grandfather was in World War II. There are 6,000 Muslims currently in the U.S. Armed Services. Not one single member of Trump's family has ever served in the military. And that should be fact-checked, because I read it today, but it rings true, and I read it from somebody who's pretty reliable, or very reliable. It's amazing. That hypocrisy has always been amazing to us.
They were too busy starting up businesses and then watching them fail.
Right.
Okay, we're going to take our first and probably only break of this hour. This is your opportunity to let us know what you think about this topic, the stories that we've covered. You can tweet us at TYT Live. We'll be reading just a couple of those. It's going to be a very fast break. When we come back, we're going to have President Obama on what he thinks about the fact that those on the terrorist watch list can still buy assault weapons. Welcome to your Friday postgame. Except it's currently midday on Thursday.
Are you gonna fire me?
Sometimes I'm being a dick. Back in 05, we almost went under, but members rescued us.
Once their only method of success is going the athletic route, it tends to be the more preferred way to treat your body.
Nothing good in the world is ever happening. Strong army that all they want to do is fight. It's totally bullshit.
Don't do drugs and don't shoot people.
TYT is all in a good mood today. I know I'm a weirdo if I read books, but fuck people. I have a stack of papers here. Believe it or not, this is how Jack used to be when he did the radio show. Wait till you see these huge things.
I'm gonna go with your tricep. Size very impressive. The quads.
That's for the members. That's in the post game together. We're too strong. welcome back to the first hour of the Young Turks, our hour-long coverage of the Orlando situation and the fallout from that. I want to read some of your tweets before we get back to the news, and there are a couple more angles that we do want to cover. Michael Gibbs says, nothing will get the U.S. past mass shootings. Newtown didn't, Orlando won't, especially since GOP ignores that victims were LGBT. That's a subject that we'll be turning to in the close of this first hour. I don't think that it's impossible. I mean, this is the sort of cliched thing that people say for a lot of stuff, but we went to the moon, we put a rover on Mars, we defeated the Nazis. I think that we can theoretically get rid of some of these guns if we wanted to. And there is precedent in countries like Australia for doing so.
And Canada.
And Canada as well. Yeah, places where lots of people love guns.
So remember, John, the Second Amendment protects the First Amendment, right? That's what people like Trump are really concerned about. Protecting the First Amendment.
Yeah.
Get the fuck out of here.
The best way to protect it is to ban media outlets from covering what you say and do.
Yeah.
I think.
How did we get press credentials to cover them? We covered them. I went to their Irvine.
That's a good point, actually.
I was surprised. First of all, shocked as shit that we got in. Second of all, shocked as shit at how complacent the rest of the media was. To be stuck in a pen, and they don't complain about it every time they go on camera.
It's natural selection. Those that weren't complacent have been banned.
I was covering him, and the place that I was working for was called Al Jazeera, and they gave us credentials. And he would come up to me, and I asked him questions all the time. So I would say that that was curious too. But the Washington Post, I just asked this question on Twitter, and I don't know, and we're off subject briefly, but did Richard Nixon ever ban the Washington Post?
No, I've read that he did not. That even during the investigation, they were never banned from the White House. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Bas Wijnen says politicians get away with ignoring science and facts because the media doesn't call them out on it. Well, that's one of the reasons that we so often try to do that sort of coverage, even though people get pissed off at how much we do of it, including calling the media on their misinformation as well, which, again, people get sick of that we do. We want to do 2 member shout-outs before we get back to the news. Member number 1520, Lucy Butcher, and member number 1521, Stephen Allison. Thank you for being members. By the way, now 1520 and 1521 are now some of the earliest members since we've grown so much thanks to the efforts of Anna Kasparian and a few other people.
How many members are there now?
There are a little over 20,000. So
wow. Remember there was that one board at the old place? You don't, but like the very old place, it was like one.
All their names were written down individually.
Yeah, no. It was like the prisoners counting their days. It was one of those things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
So Jake and I are going to do a 1-mile race, which I'm actually kind of nervous about, in Philly, and it's going to be available for our members. They're going to be able to stream it live, and for those who can't catch it live, they'll be able to catch it later in the archives. But we're going to start putting out training videos because JR will be training me for the race.
You should do one like I did with the Misty thing.
We probably should do that. But I'm excited and nervous at the same time because even though Jake is older than me and he doesn't appear to be in great shape, he has 2 things over me that are very important in a race: endurance and willpower. And
he doesn't have a lot of willpower.
Yeah, he doesn't want to get beaten. So,
there was a race that I raced. I raced JR with like an enormous head start. Do you remember that, JR?
Yes, I remember we did I was running 100, you run 75 maybe, or even like that, right?
Yeah.
And it kept kind of not working the way we wanted it to.
Right. But somebody got in.
And then, and then I ran it 6 times, I think. And the previous night I'd been drinking heavily. And so eventually I was like, okay, wait a second, everything's getting really light. And I was just about to pass out. It was really bad.
It was a medical emergency. I couldn't beat you because that would have been pitiful. I just wouldn't have done that to you. So, yeah.
You saved me. Thank you.
You're welcome. We refuse to be pitiful here. Okay, let's turn back to the news. More incredibly serious news here. We have 3 more topics we want to cover. Obviously, we've progressed through the majority of the hour. We're going to go a little bit over, but if we can try to just constrain a little bit, because we do want to cover all of these topics. Each one is incredibly important. One area where the law could clearly be changed to help reduce the incidence of terrorist attacks like what happened in the Orlando nightclub shooting would be to ban those on the terror watch list from purchasing firearms, especially assault weapons capable of inflicting widespread devastation on a large number of humans. And Barack Obama actually spoke about that particular issue just days before the shooting. Here's a section of his remarks.
knowing that we apply common sense to other issues in our society, specifically like holding irresponsible people accountable for their actions when they drink and drive and kill somebody. And we do that without restricting control of cars and cell phones to the rest of us, the good guys. Why then do you and Hillary want to control and restrict and limit gun manufacturers, gun owners, and the responsible use of guns and ammunition to the rest of us, the good guys, instead of holding the bad guys accountable for their actions? And
First of all, the notion that I or Hillary or Democrats or whoever you want to choose are hell-bent on taking away folks' guns is just not true. And I don't care how many times the NRA says it. I'm about to leave office. There have been more guns sold since I've been president than just about any time in U.S. history. There are enough guns for every man, woman, and child in this country. What I have said is precisely what you suggested, which is, why don't we treat this like every other thing that we use? I just came from a meeting today in the Situation Room in which I've got people who we know have been on ISIL websites, living here in the United States, U.S. citizens. And we're allowed to put them on the no-fly list when it comes to airlines. But because of the National Rifle Association, I cannot prohibit those people from buying a gun. This is somebody who is a known ISIL sympathizer, and if he wants to walk in to a gun store or a gun show right now and buy as many weapons as ammo as he can, nothing's prohibiting him from doing that, even though the FBI knows who that person is.
And so that seems like the most clear-cut situation in which you're saying hold them accountable for the bad things that they've done. You obviously think that people who are sympathizers with ISIL, who are going to their websites, who have been abroad, like, those people are your ticking time bombs that you talk about in human, two-legged, walking around form. And does that guy seriously not want them to be stopped for at least a little while from getting guns?
He made the great point about if someone drinks and drives, we don't take everyone's car away. Right? Yeah, but you do have to get a license for your car. You do have to go through training for your car.
You may,
safety features.
You may not have to be able to drive for a while. Safety features. Yeah, they're airbags. There's no trigger lock. Right?
But one more thing, and it's like, and we put that guy in jail. So, and he goes, why don't we do that with guns? If someone commits a crime with a gun, we put them in jail. What kind of fantasy land is this guy living in? If somehow we're not prosecuting people who commit crimes with guns, somehow that's okay, but we're just prosecuting drugs. So again, he comes from this weird jumping off point that is completely fucked up. Like, it has nothing to do with reality. We drunk drivers, but why not guns? What are you, mental? And by the way, cars have other uses. If the only use for a car was to drive drunk and kill people, we'd get rid of it. Now, you might say, well, look, guns have legitimate uses, killing deer or defending from bandits who are coming in through your windows. Yes, but there are certain types of guns that don't have that purpose. Their purpose, as I talked about in my final judgment today, is to inflict as much damage on the human body as possible, as quickly as possible. And the analogy then with cars would be, there are cars that are far more dangerous than other cars. My friend works for IndyCar. I can't get one of those cars and just drive around the road. There are cars that are so dangerous that they're not allowed. There are guns that are so dangerous they should not be allowed. That should be clear. He doesn't want people who are being investigated for links to terrorism. There are millions and millions of people, probably 40% of the country at this point, that wants to spend $13 billion plus to build a 2,000-mile wall on the off chance that it'll stop an ISIS sympathizer from coming into our country. But they don't want to stop them from walking into a Walmart and buying a gun that can help them blow away dozens of Americans.
That's the part of it that's
amazing to me.
A story like this, a tragedy like this, for me, perfectly lays out just how disingenuous these people are when they talk about how worried they are about terrorism in the country, right? Because when it comes to Syrian refugees that are fleeing their own country because of the fact that it's war-torn, because of the fact that ISIS has taken a hold of it, because of the fact that they want to get away from that violence and protect their own family members, well then these people will say, no, they pose a threat, we got to get rid of them. But again, in the same breath, when it comes to these people who are on a terrorist watch list, meaning there's some indication, there's probable cause indicating that they could be radicalized, they could have ties to, some insurgent group in the Middle East, you know what? We want to make sure that we don't just deny people access to guns because they're on a list.
Yeah.
There's no probable cause. Then you're not genuinely concerned about terrorism. It's one thing to identify the problem. For a lot of people, they think that this shooting was just about radical Islamic terrorism, right? Okay, fine. Let's say in your perfect scenario, that's what it's really about. It has nothing to do with bigotry toward gay people that's been repeated over and over again in the media, with Republicans in our own country referring to transgender men as rapists over and over again. Okay? Nothing to do with that. Just has to do with the fact that these are radical Islamic terrorists. We've identified the problem. Okay, so what now? You need solutions. You don't just identify a problem and then sit back and talk about how much you hate Muslims. You have to actually do something about that problem, and we won't do anything about it.
Yeah. I would love to know why they want the FBI to be investigating possible terrorists. What is the point if when you identify potential terrorists, you can't do anything about it? Right. Trump loved to keep saying that in the recent shooting, I apologize, I can't remember the city, in LA, the shooting. San Bernardino. I keep thinking of Santa Barbara. San Bernardino. That there were guns and there was suspicious stuff and people knew, but they didn't say anything. What if they had said something? You apparently don't believe anything should have been done. Their guns shouldn't have been taken away, certainly, because they have Second Amendment rights. So what is the point of investigating them? Now, look, Obama there is talking about the possibility of stopping terrorists, those on the terrorist watch list from getting guns. That was actually a possibility. This was voted on. He was referring to legislation that the Senate considered back in December following the mass shooting in San Bernardino, which would have prohibited individuals on the terrorist watch list from buying guns. Now, it seems like, considering that maybe in that case that would have stopped 14 people from being killed and dozens from being wounded, that would have been a good thing. But of course, it was voted down. And I want to bring up this list right here because you're going to see the list of the senators that voted against that. Now, there are, I believe, 53 Republicans on that list. There's also one Democrat, Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota, voted against that. One Republican voted for that. I don't know. It's difficult to find as stark a breakdown on an issue as on stopping suspected terrorists. This is the party that says that's what they care about more than anything else, is stopping acts of terrorism. Now, we put this list up there because many watching this video right now live in a state that is cursed with these names. If you could leave those names up for just a second. We're cursed by having those callous, bought assholes as their senators. But they don't have to stay your senator. This year, or in 2 years, or in 4 years, you can knock them out of office. They care so much more about the relatively tiny checks they get from the NRA than from stopping suspected terrorists from getting guns and gunning down Americans. I want you to remember those names, especially if you live in that area, because those are people that
trying to figure out who the only Republican who did Mark Kirk.
I believe it is Mark Kirk. That's amazing that you were able to tell that from that list, but it is Mark Kirk.
That is incredible.
The other thing that, and we talked about the hypocrisy in Congress, and it just they had a moment of silence today, right? Which they always do, and
protested by a Democrat.
Well, right, and the thing that's amazing about it is that there's nobody more silent all the time. The one time they should be making noise, they decide to be silent, and that's true. It sounds trite and like I created it before I came on the show. I didn't. I just saw just now that they have the moment of silence, and I can't. They're silent all the time.
Yes.
Yeah, gotta stop.
Okay, let's turn to another area. We talked about in the background of the shooter some of the homophobia. Let's focus on that in a little bit broader context. Although it should be obvious at this point, there are still many in America, both regular people and politicians, who are attempting to ignore the obvious, deadly homophobic nature of the terrorist attack in Orlando. That's what it was. There might have been religious influence as well, but this is a person who is driven by his hatred for the LGBT community that led him to go to the club multiple times, to stalk the people there, to rant about how much he hated gay individuals, and to eventually kill 49 of them and injure more than 50. But this is just the largest and latest attack on the LGBT community in our country and around the world. And so we want to talk a little bit about that so that it's not lost. Now, the reason I'm talking about the ignoring is there have been a couple of instances of that. There was a show in the UK on the Sky Network of a man making clear that this was a homophobic attack, and his co-host attempting to say, well, let's not focus on any one group. This is about freedom for all people. Don't try to claim ownership of this. And then Rick Scott, who of course should be particularly empathic of the people there, considering that he is their governor, refused to even mention in extended comments with the news that this was the community that was targeted here, and you're going to see instead what he chose to focus on in this video.
There are a lot of Americans watching right now who want to know what they can do to help. What can they do to help, sir?
I think it's pray. Pray for just think about. Pray for the victims. Pray for their families. Pray that this never happens again. We have a wonderful state. Orlando is a wonderful community. We have a wonderful country. I don't ever want this to happen again. It's devastating to these families. That my heart just goes out to them. I just can't imagine.
Can you if it was at a church or a mosque or a Jewish community center or any other group, which it has been, of course, we have terrorist attacks to go around. You identify the group. You identify that this wasn't a random place. Okay, this was not. We have a wonderful country. Sure, we also have a homophobic country with a history of violence, particularly against the LGBT community. And you have to identify that. You're the politician who's supposed to be responsible for these people, and you refuse to even identify who they are. And you say that we should pray for these people. But what you mean is pray for these people and then immediately go back to ignoring them and to trying to take away their rights wherever possible. Now, this is going to take a minute, I apologize, but I want to briefly run through some of the other violence, because many people believe that, like they believe that racism is gone from America, they also think that homophobia is gone from America, but that is unfortunately not the case. Until this weekend's horrific shooting, the largest massacre of gay people was an arson attack at a bar in New Orleans back in 1973. LGBT people had piled into the upstairs lounge for a happy hour to celebrate the 4th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising. Just before 8 p.m., someone, or possibly a group of people, doused the stairwell with lighter fluid and then lit it. Within seconds, fire spread through the bar, power went out and the room filled with black smoke. 32 people died and many others were injured. Many of the people who died were unidentifiable, not only because the fire scorched their bodies, but also because, despite the celebration of gay liberation, many gay men were not out of the closet and used fake IDs and aliases in gay bars. Even their families didn't know they were there. There was also the Gay Pride Parade in Jerusalem in 2015. We're not talking about ancient history here. An ultra-Orthodox Jewish man stabbed 6 people, killing 1, 10 years after attacking participants in the same parade back in 2005. In Roanoke, Virginia in 2000, a man opened fire at the Backstreet Cafe, killing 1 man and wounding 6 others. The gunman told police he was on a mission to kill gay people. And I want to bring up this chart here because you're going to see reported anti-LGBTQ hate crimes in America. Now, there's wide disparity between different groups, between different reporting groups, but what we're seeing there is literally thousands of attacks against the LGBT community every single year. This is the one that's getting the news today with good reason, but it is simply the largest, simply the most recent in a pattern that is all too common throughout American history, including this year. And to have Republicans just say that it doesn't matter that it's that group.
It's also weird that praying hasn't made it stop. He said, let's pray that it doesn't happen again, right?
I mean,
it's time for Plan B.
Yeah, praying, first of all, does nothing. But second of all, I find the notion of praying a little insulting when religion is one of the things that honestly spurs the hatred toward the gay community, right? But another thing to keep in mind is this shouldn't be surprising for anyone. It shouldn't be surprising that, conservatives in the United States refuse to acknowledge that these were LGBT victims. I mean, they're the same people that have been, fighting in favor of discriminatory legislation against transgender people, referring to transgender men as rapists. They're the biggest threat to your wives and your daughters. They're going to go into bathrooms and they're going to sexually assault and molest your family members. I mean, that type of rhetoric is repeated and regurgitated over and over and over again. So they don't care about the victims. They care about exploiting a situation like this for political gain, as I've mentioned before. Rick Scott issued a statement because he's the governor of Florida and he's forced to issue a statement. Okay, he doesn't want to do anything about gun control. He doesn't want to do anything to increase tolerance toward the gay community. It's that simple. Okay, there are no solutions being proposed by our legislators right now, and that is the real crime. that this will continue to happen over and over again. We're going to continue losing our loved ones and grieving over this ridiculous, corrupt political system.
Yeah. It's incredibly frustrating to see it, and especially if it was at a church, they would never stop talking about it, and it would be the same level of tragedy, but at least they would identify it. When your community has been hunted down, when predators have hunted it for as long as it has existed, when a terrible attack, the worst shootout like this in American history happens, and they refuse to even admit who you are. And so we've seen recently where we draw the line on hate speech. And it was hate speech. Trump's attacks against the judge. Everybody called it out as that's unacceptable, and even Republicans agreed. But all of the terrible things that Ted Cruz and his pastor and Marco Rubio and Rick, all these groups, they will never pull the trigger in a gay club. But it is their rhetoric and their philosophy that allows a country to live in fear of this community, to demonize this community, and to hate this community. And when you have a country so filled up with drugs, with mental illness that goes undiagnosed and untreated, somebody will pull the trigger someday. And we need to start calling out that sort of bigotry the same as we would when a Mexican judge gets attacked for perceived bias.
Yeah, and you bring up Marco Rubio. He is showing that crisis equals opportunity. He's now saying, well, maybe I should run for Senate again. So he's reportedly thinking about running for his seat. But he said he wasn't because of this. And I just dawned on me that it's obviously when you see something like this, more of the same is really the cure rather than less of the same, right? I mean, so you see the shooting in Orlando. Well, let's re-elect their senator in Orlando, in Florida, who's been so friendly to gun owners and so unfriendly to gay Americans. Yeah.
All right, one final story for the first hour. After the shooting in Orlando, Florida, many people got together in an effort to help the victims that were injured, and they did so by attempting to donate blood. But even though this was an attack on the LGBT community, the ironic part of the story is that gay men are still barred from donating their own blood to help the victims if they've had sex within the last year. So there has been a ban on gay men donating blood for quite some time. It actually started decades ago. The FDA first put a complete ban on blood donations from men who have ever had sex with men in 1983. However, things recently changed, although they didn't change as much as we would like. In fact, in December of 2015, the FDA revised its recommendations allowing gay men to donate blood, but only if they have been abstinent for the past 12 months. So again, making it seem as though if you are a gay man, you, for some reason, have a higher risk of AIDS or HIV or any sexually transmitted disease. So we just have to make sure that you haven't had sex in the last year so we can detect whether or not there are any issues in your blood by testing it. So the rationale for the the rationale for the 1-year abstinence period, according to the FDA, is that tests do not pick up recent infections. A standard test that looks for an immune response to HIV can find infections after a 25-day window. So I don't know why there seems to be an emphasis on sexual orientation as opposed to sexual behavior. And what I mean by that is there are plenty of straight people who engage in risky, unprotected sexual behavior that could pose a threat if they're donating their blood. But there's no attention to them. There's no emphasis on them. Yes, everyone gets asked many questions when they want to donate blood. But why is it that the only people that get banned are gay men?
Yeah. And look, they're going to say, okay, we found stats that show statistically significant higher likelihood of some infection. But if you found an age group that had that higher, you wouldn't ban 24 to 27-year-olds. If you found people who live in a particular area, it's the only way that this sort of discrimination can exist is that people generally think, even if they become more liberal towards the LGBT community, there's still an inherent suspicion, an assumption of dirtiness, of impurity. Clearly there is something wrong with them, something foul that makes their blood different from other people's blood. They can store the blood, they can test it for longer, they can do all of those things, but they refuse to do that. And I don't know when it's ever going to change. I don't know when we're ever going to demand that it changes, that people be treated the same regardless of their sexual orientation.
Yeah, I mean, look, this story adds insult to injury for the gay community. You know, they were victimized by this horrific shooting. and then when they want to help their peers, they're unable to do so because they've engaged in sexual activity in the last year. That's absurd, okay? Again, the emphasis should be on risky sexual behavior of all people, of all sexual orientations. It shouldn't be limited to gay guys.
Yeah, right. Good point.
Okay, well, thank you guys for joining us for this first hour. Obviously, one of our rare focused first hour is all about one topic, but justifiably so, considering its a tragic, historic nature. Thank you guys for joining me in this. Many of us are going to be leaving, but Anna, you're going to be heading up the second hour soon. And
yes.
Who's going to be with you for that?
I believe Grace and Francis will be with me in the second hour. It'll be... I mean, we have more tragic stories in the second hour, not related to the Orlando shooting, but they're important to cover, so I hope you stick around for that, and we'll see you in just a bit.
What?
There's a progressive revolution happening right now in America, and the corporate media is doing their damnedest to ignore it. But we at the Jimmy Dore Show will not be ignored. We question power. People are sick and tired of corporate stooges like you. We do it with passion. Are you kidding me? And we do it with laughs. I don't think estates have two cars that don't work in the driveway.
That's it. Thank you.
Our show is now heard nationwide on the Pacifica Network, and it's heard around the world on the Young Turks Network. We've been able to travel, go to Iowa caucus. So we saw a guy about 5 minutes ago. We saw another guy. We went to Nevada. We actually broke real news. The chairman of the caucus right there, he's copying it off of his hand. That was picked up by other news sites because corporate news isn't on the ground anymore doing their job. So we're asking you now to donate to our Indiegogo campaign. We've got all kinds of great perks at all levels of donations. We've got Don't Freak Out t-shirts that everyone has been asking for. We want you to be part of it. Help us build it. And we'll build a progressive revolution together. We're doing this show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TYT. A little change in our panel. This is the second hour, which I wish I could say had some lighter stories, but unfortunately there's bad news all around today. And here to help me cover that bad news is Frances Maxwell and also Grace Baldridge, who did an awesome job on Pop Trigger today talking about the story that we're also going to cover in the second hour. It's a tough day, to say the least, and it's hard to... it's hard to hold in my anger. I'm trying to be level-headed with the way that we cover these stories, but it's difficult considering the fact that, these tragic stories happen over and over again and there never seems to be any real solution. All right, let's do some TYT Lives. Cathal McKinney says, Grace hugs, looking forward to an LGBT voice in this conversation. John Blackman says, easy gun access for all is an 18th century anarchism and has to change. Constitution is useless if it allows harm. Brian Newton says, too true, so very true. Moment of silence for gun violence. About gun violence is Congress's status quo. You guys have been silent. We need real solutions. A moment of silence is the last thing we need. If anything, it's just, an easy gesture to do in order to mourn the deaths of these innocent people. But instead of doing that, how about you actually propose some real solutions? Lisa Fritzzinger says, blood ban on gay and bisexual men, referring to the last story that we did. Yes, any man who's had sex with another man in the last year. That's what we were referring to. And easily readable name says, nice, it's my favorite TYT guest, Grace, with so much bad news. I'm glad someone is going to brighten our day.
Oh, I don't know.
It's not
I'll try, yeah.
It's not Grace's fault. It's just been a terrible news day. So there aren't any uplifting stories in this hour, if that's what you're looking for. All right, let's get right to it. You guys ready?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. Before the tragic shooting in Orlando, there was another tragic shooting that claimed the life of a singer by the name of Christina Grimmie. She was a contestant on The Voice and an up-and-coming star that many people admired. Now, the tragic part is not only that she was shot, she was also shot at her own performance afterwards when she was signing autographs and meeting with fans. The gunman, who we will not name, traveled to the Plaza Live Theater with 2 small caliber handguns. He walked up to Grimmie, who was signing autographs after the show, and shot her around 10:30 p.m. She was only 22 years old. Right now, we don't know much information about the shooter or what his motive was. After he had shot Christina Grimmie, her brother Marcus tackled him to save his sister's life, and while doing so, the shooter actually shot himself. And to be completely honest with you guys, and maybe this is not a PC thing to say, I wish he would have just done that instead of claimed the life of an innocent person like Christina Grimmie. So that happened in Orlando prior to the Orlando shooting at Pulse, which claimed the lives of 49 innocent individuals.
Yeah, it's an awful tragedy that really strikes close to home because we actually had the privilege of interviewing her. She was on the show, Pop Trigger, a few times. I met her at iHeartRadio last year, and whilst many celebrities bypassed the numbers, she recognised the network, recognised Amir, our producer, and stopped and was so nice, so humble, and she had a beautiful light about her, the way she spoke about things, and she obviously she portrayed it with her gift, right? She was a fantastic singer, and as you see from the messages, from the voice and everything else, she really did stand for what this world can be and how beautiful it can be, right? And someone who just has nothing but darkness in their soul just took that away from her. And obviously you want to say something to her brother, right? Who was instinctive in his actions and probably prevented many other people potentially dying if the gunman happened to unleash his evil upon other people, right? But again, so I was doing a lot of soul searching, thinking about how I actually met this person and how she was such a fantastic individual. And on the deadliest weekend that the US has faced, it's so similar to everything we see. Like, it's so similar to what we consistently read in the news. I tweeted out that we wake up and it's no longer a surprise. We wake up and it's just you're scared every time you see this hashtag or the trending or whatever is going on, because you don't know how close to home it's going to be. It's on Orlando, then we have a threat in West Hollywood, then you have a threat in San Bernardino, and the connection remains the same.
You have a threat in UCLA. I mean, these shootings should hit close to home for everyone, because it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what your background is, it doesn't matter how safe you feel. It could be anyone at any time. And a story like this, more than anything, not only infuriates me about our lax gun laws. This guy had access to 2 handguns. He had 2 handguns that he brought to shoot and kill Christina Grimmie. But it makes you distrustful, and it makes me not want to go out in public. It makes me not want to do fan meetups. It makes me want to keep to myself and just do my show, spend time with family, go home, and just not trust anything or anyone until we actually do something about the gun laws that we have in place right now.
Yeah, I agree with what both of you are saying. I never met Christina, although she came on Pop Trigger before I was a part of the show, but I feel, and I'm sure other people will feel the same way, I feel like I knew Christina because I was following her YouTube channel before she was on The Voice. She was Zelda X Lover 64, and she had this very, very hyper personal YouTube channel, and if you haven't checked out her videos, her beautiful covers yet, I would urge you to do so, because her light really, truly does shine through. I've been listening to her music and watching her videos all weekend since this came out, and you really do feel like, and so many people are going to say this, that you feel like you knew her because there are these videos of this girl in her room when she was, 15 years old. She was really young, putting out these beautiful covers of songs that were just so personal and so poignant, and then she got picked up on The Voice, and America fell in love with her, but it's this story of this girl that we were all following along with. I'm a big Selena Gomez fan. She opened for Selena Gomez. Like, this, Christina was so much a part of my consciousness. And then I'll never forget when my friend who works for the publicity, her publicist, gave me a call and was like, I'm freaking out right now. And of course I'm thinking it's something with a guy. I didn't think of what it would be. And then she's like, Christina's been shot and she's been killed. And it's just, all I would say is, as this opportunity, if you don't know her name yet, maybe it's a generational thing. My mom didn't know who she was. She just heard about it on the news. Please check out her YouTube channel, because I really think that is a good way to honor her in her death. Her voice is amazing, and her talent was truly once in a lifetime. So please check that out.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
So I want to cut to a video of Pop Trigger, which is one of our network shows. In this video, Brett Ehrlich talks about Christina Grimmie. She was on Pop Trigger, and if you guys want to check out, her appearances on the show, you can do so by going to youtube.com/popcultured. But, Brett reflects on her, and I think it's worth going to the video, so let's take a look.
And I didn't know her very well, but she was here once, and I remember the shit out of her. And I tried to rewatch the segment that we did together, and it myself to get to know, because when tragedies like this happen, there are people behind them, real people with real stories who had real plans of what to do tomorrow, and they can't do it anymore. And you can go back along her social media and see she's just out and about going, hey guys, I got a show in Orlando, come by because I want to meet you. And she was so positive in that way, and now she's gone.
So this reinstates the harsh but obvious truth that you mentioned, and it makes life enjoyable, and that's not to just instill fear on people that are watching this. There's stats that are thrown around that just fall on deaf ears anymore. You know what it is safe? Is the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is safe.
It's the safest thing in America.
It's the safest thing in America, and why? Because as long as the politicians who stand by the NRA and any other association that's, I would say, that doesn't want to reflect on something like this, and you throw all the stats to them, more shootings in a week, mass murders in a week, than Canada has in 20 years, that doesn't move them. That doesn't bring them to tears, or because it's not their bloodshed. Their pockets remain lined. And whilst their pockets remain lined, they don't worry about the blood that's shed. And that is the biggest problem here, because each time a tragedy strikes home, there's one obvious connection. You can blame the race, you can blame the motive, you can blame whether it's someone looking to cause some agenda or take it out. The harsh reality is the United States constitutionally gives these people the ability to go and perform those actions. More so than any other country with Western values. And that's just, it's almost hard to get it out without just completely going over boiling point, because it's so frustrating. I moved here. My parents watched me move here, and I have to consistently look at text messages from them, and they're like, this happened in UCLA, this happened so close. Like, they are petrified of sending their kid to a country which embraces dreams and has so much good about it. But one main problem remains, is that it's a medieval rule that stays within this country, and it consistently comes back, and everyone will make excuses on how it's going to protect each other, and it's going to allow for us to stand up against this evil. Show me.
I mean,
show me where has it stood up to.
The incredible part about all of this is it's one thing to have lawmakers who are getting funded by the NRA to continuously push for lax gun laws, right? They're deplorable, to say the least, but that is a symptom to push this propaganda. When they know the NRA funds politicians to spread the type of paranoia and fear-mongering that you see in the media about, oh my God, you got to protect your family from intruders, people are going to come into your home. I mean, that type of paranoia is what fueled the sea of guns that we're living in today, right? And Americans are sheep. You're sheep, okay? When you regurgitate the talking points of an organization that's getting funded and is getting rich by weapons manufacturers, you're sheep. That's all you are. If you continuously fight for these types of laws, or lack of laws, that lead to innocent people like this sweet woman being shot and killed, the types of laws that lead to 49 people getting shot and killed in a single club, you're sheep. That's all you are, okay? And if you like guns because you like to go and shoot it as your hobby, or if you're a paranoid, crazy person who thinks you need to protect yourself and you think you're Rambo, well, your obsession with guns is leading to the deaths of innocent people like this. And I'm supposed to sit here and be level-headed and calm about stories like this, but it's hard. It's hard.
No, and I think you make a good point. If you are regurgitating that, then you are part of the problem.
Absolutely.
And I'm looking at people who are getting into these discussions on fucking Facebook. You know what I mean? The people, when you were regurgitating those, Anna makes a very good, and let's try and look for some humor here. You're not Rambo, okay?
Yeah.
You're not Rambo. You look stupid. You look stupid, and you are a sheep. And it's hard. It's hard not to get upset, Francis. I hear you. It's hard not to just get to a boiling point because this girl was 22 years old signing autographs for her fans. She went on Snapchat telling her fans to come meet up with her because she trusted. She had that level of trust. And now, apparently, we cannot have it.
We can't have that. I certainly, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in fan meetups. I'm just not. I love our fans, but who knows what that opens you up to, especially in the current climate that we're living in now.
And I go back to the fact that I've had the privilege of being on two sides of a world where guns are feared in the United Kingdom. If we see someone who happens to have some sort of weapon that maybe is concealed, we're alert to the fact that that's not normal. You see it in the United States, and it immediately triggers in your head, well, constitutionally, he can have that. He can have that gun. So I'm more against his rights if I was to go up, or her rights if I was to go up and say, why do you have that weapon? That's more against the rights of the United States people. Whereas in the United Kingdom, the fact is if we see a gun, I brought my girlfriend to the UK, and she asked, like, why do police officers not have guns? Like, certain amounts of them do, but we don't have a need for them because we're not swimming in a sea of weapons. We don't have to protect each other to that extreme. So if we happen to see a weapon, maybe we're more alert to it because it's not normal.
And also, no one's willing to have a discussion about what the Constitution really says. Like, are we giving guns to, like, when we give guns to people that are on the terrorist watch list, is that a well-regulated militia? Is that the well-regulated militia that we're giving guns to? Are they constitutionally protected to own guns?
Yeah,
it's just fucking ridiculous. We say that these people are constitutionally protected to own guns because we have allowed the NRA, which again is funded by weapons manufacturers, to interpret the Constitution for us. And they do so by funding the politicians and fueling these ridiculous lax gun laws. So that's the reality of the country we live in. So if you like shooting your gun and it makes you feel good about yourself and you think you're a tough guy, well, there are consequences to that. And the consequences, again, are lost innocent lives. And I know you don't care about that because I know it makes you feel like a big boy when you're shooting your weapon. Anyway, let's take a break. We'll be back.
An article out in Politico quoting a dozen Democratic legislators who say, Bernie, yeah, come on, let's wind this thing down. And they want to tell them, shh, don't criticize Hillary. Know your role. Your job is to energize all these people and then hand them over to us so that they can vote against Donald Trump and in favor of Hillary Clinton. Politico explains, Sanders has repeatedly dismissed Clinton supporters as part of the establishment, which Democratic senators interpret as showing disrespect for them. To which I say, goddamn right it is. You are the establishment. You have been for Hillary Clinton, who is clearly an establishment candidate. A lot of you have the same problems with those issues on trade, financial regulation, foreign policy. A lot of you voted for those wars. A lot of you want to let corporations do whatever they want. When you get in office, you go, okay, now, corporations that donated to me, how can I help you? See, that's disrespectful. The movement exists and attaches itself to Bernie Sanders because Bernie Sanders has a record of 40 years of honesty and fighting for those same principles. We know what Hillary Clinton's positions are. We know what Bernie Sanders' positions are. We know what your positions are. That's what drives you crazy.
Welcome back to TYT, guys. Sorry for the extremely somber tone of the show today, but it's fitting considering how tragic the stories have been over the weekend. I want to read some TYT lives for you. Pixie Hack says, not being PC is why we love TYT. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's I don't know. It's just difficult to pretend like people who are fighting against gun legislation are rational people. They're just not, right? And so I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh yes, let me listen to your argument about why it makes sense that we have mass shootings almost every day in this country. Anyway, fan of Stuffs says no law should be safer than its people. Totally agree. Chelsea Charles says, just read today that gun sales skyrocket whenever there's a mass shooting. No wonder there isn't a push for gun reform. That's absolutely true. And part of the reason why is because a lot of the gun nuts in the country think that there will be gun legislation, so they start stockpiling. So, in essence, organizations like the NRA and the weapons manufacturers that fund them get to profit off tragedies like this. It's disgusting. All right, let's move forward. A mass shooting happened in Orlando that claimed the lives of 49 individuals, including the shooter himself. Fortunately, there was a similar plot in Los Angeles that was foiled by local police forces. Now, this shooter, or would-be shooter, is James Wesley Howell, and according to Santa Monica police officials, he apparently had a small arsenal and admitted that he was planning on going to the Gay Pride Parade. Now, initially, there was a police officer who had posted on Twitter that Howell had mentioned that he planned on going to the Gay Pride Parade to harm gay people, but that was later changed. Apparently, there was some sort of miscommunication, which, to be completely honest with you guys, I'm not buying. He was from Indiana, came to Los Angeles, had a small arsenal, and said he was planning on going to the Gay Pride Parade. Thankfully, he got caught before anything bad happened. But for anyone who's saying, oh no, there's no evidence that he was going to cause any harm, sure, you keep telling yourself that. Now, Howell was arrested Sunday after telling police officers he was en route to LA Pride, where, again, originally it was said that he wanted to harm the event. He was heavily armed with what police called a small arsenal in his car. Police found him sitting in a car registered in Indiana, and a search warrant turned up 3 assault rifles, high-capacity magazines, ammunition, and a 5-gallon bucket with chemicals that could be used to create an explosive device. He was arrested within the last year after pointing a gun in a threatening manner at a neighbor during an argument. So he's been in situations in the past where he's posted anti-gay, right-wing propaganda. He absolutely despises, liberal politicians. I'll give you just one example of something that he had posted on Facebook. So he had compared Hillary Clinton to Hitler. He said, he quoted Hitler, society's needs come before the individual's needs, and then he quoted Hillary Clinton, trying to draw comparisons between the two. So again, luckily he was caught. Luckily he is in custody. His bail is set at $500,000, so it's unlikely he's going to be out anytime soon, and he is awaiting a trial date, which I believe will be on Tuesday.
So here we have, a potential killer. Now, my agenda, of course, very reminiscent of what we've already probably talked about. I'm sure a lot of them you guys talked about in the first hour. We can talk about the laws and everything that has to be changed, right? But my agenda also, along with that, is how he is portrayed the certain, I would say, through certain aspects of the media. Fox News, for example, right? So we have a potential killer, same agenda, different skin color, different stereotype, but he's got the same agenda, which is evil. And how is he portrayed? No, he's not. He didn't have any sort of terrorist motive. He didn't have any sort of terrorist obligation to go out and cause mass harm. And therefore, they overlook the fact that here's another man able to get his hands on guns after the fact that he's already been found out to have wanted to use guns. Why? Because they're fun as hell. I see if I hear that excuse one more time. We had it 3 or 4 months ago when there was this guy who shot across his neighbour's window because it was something to do. Because they had all these guns, and what do you do when you have all these guns? Oh, you want to use them. So they're given the freedom to go out and potentially use them until someone gets hurt. He had the same objective that the same killer in Orlando had. He just never had the ability to go and follow it through.
And the reason why he got caught is because he was parked in some neighborhood looking very suspicious, and thankfully someone living in that neighborhood alerted the police, and police came and investigated, and they found that he had that small arsenal. Let me ask you something. For anyone who's saying, like, no, he didn't plan to do any harm to that gay pride parade, okay, why did he have chemicals for an explosive device? Why did he have 3 assault weapons? Why did he have a small arsenal? This guy's from Indiana. He clearly does not like gay people, and he's used violent rhetoric, threatening rhetoric in the past. Here, I'll give you another example. He gave the Louisville Metro Police Department a 1-star review 2 months ago saying, they are slow as fuck, so they only get 1 finger as I'm shifting gears.
So that takes it back to this culture that you mentioned in the previous clip. It's this culture that embraces the fact that there's guns easily accessible wherever you go, right? And it's a culture that's portrayed consistently through movies, everything else. But these guns are accessible. Do we need to mention the gun used again in Florida, the AR-15, a gun that just has such savage, I would say, interpretation around it. It's used for slaughter, and it's used to fire between 20 rounds so that you can kill in mass. It's not used because it's fun, it's not out there. It's used to go and commit mass killings. And it obviously ties with Sandy Hook, and it ties in previous mass shootings, and it's readily available in Florida. Easier to obtain than a car. And it's still circulating.
Yep.
And it's because people like this want to get their hands on it because it's fun. I don't want to just be able to shoot one handgun and shoot 1 round at a time. I want to be able to shoot 15 and 20 by because it's badass. I love my guns, and I love to be able to shoot that in magnitude.
And I think there's another point that we need to talk about is that, that these were 2 attacks, one thwarted against the LGBT community. And I forget because I live in Los Angeles, and I was at Gay Pride in LA, and it was one heck of a party that this guy didn't ruin. I'm telling you, it was a really, really happy, joyful, supportive day, and it was important. That this country actually, truly, is not down with the gays. We like to celebrate it in the media. We like to talk about Orange is the New Black. We like to love one. Look at love one in the Supreme Court. That's not the case. We've made strides, but there are people that hate me, Anna. There are people that will hate me because I'm holding my girlfriend's hand.
Yep.
And I'm a comedian. I'm fine to brush that off because I try not to give myself a minute to pause and think about how far that hate could go. I go to gay clubs all the time. They're the best clubs. Everyone knows that. Everyone's allowed to get in. You can kind of wear what you want. You can dance. The music's better. Share is better. Everyone knows that, okay? Look, sexuality is a choice, and I chose better. No, it's not. But what I'm trying to say is that I would have been at Pulse. It's very possible I would have been at Pulse.
And this could have happened anywhere, okay? It was likely to happen at Gay Pride in Los Angeles if the police department in Santa Monica didn't investigate this guy and catch him. That's the reality of the matter, right?
But it's this perfect combination of the access that people have to guns, like you were talking about, Francis, with the hate that is still pretty much unaddressed. Read any YouTube comments of any video I'm in. You'll see it. There is hate there. Mm-hmm. There is actual hate there. And the scary thing that I've kind of chosen not to think about, but now I'm being forced to think about, is that people, when they hate enough, can go out and do something about it. Can hate me, can hate gay people, can hate whatever lifestyle so much that they can just go and do that. And every community, we saw it in South Carolina, at a historically black church with kids at Sandy Hook. And that didn't, and now gay people, what community will it be?
Well, what enables these people more than anything, and definitely encourages them, is we have a political party that demonizes the LGBT community, fearmongers about the LGBT community. You know, a lot of people were giving me flack because we were covering the transgender bathroom stories. Yeah, you know what? I'm proud that we covered those stories because it's important to debunk the ridiculous fear-mongering that you see from the right wing in this country about the transgender community. When you have an entire political organization or group talking about, oh, these people, they're going to rape everyone. Well, what do you think it does to unhinged, unstable individuals like this guy, right? It encourages them to carry out acts of violence. Yeah. And so you're right. There is a tremendous amount of intolerance. I think that a lot of people are distracted by the positive strides that the gay community has made in, you know, same-sex marriage and stuff like that. But the reality is, in various states, there are still no protections for gay individuals. People are still able to discriminate against them openly and freely. And again, we have politicians. These are supposed to be our leaders, fear-mongering about the community.
Yeah, here's the thing to think about in Florida, just really quickly. If you are one of the 53 people who are injured, and I hope that that's still the number, if you're one of the 53 people that are injured from what happened at Pulse, you can legally in Florida be fired for missing work if they find out that you are gay because of that. Just something to think about, okay? And another thing, I saw a really good tweet from a comedian, and she said, you're afraid to be in bathrooms with us. We don't want to be anywhere near you. So you're right. You guys did a really good job of covering the transgender issue, and it's important to acknowledge that this was an attack on the LGBT community and the hate that is still very much alive and well in this country towards my community, and I'm fucking sick of it.
And you mentioned it there. So it's the hate that has just plagued this country in many different aspects, race, where it's the LGBT community, anything. But it's the accessibility that no other country, and as I continue to mention, that upholds Western values, has the readily accessible tools to go and take that agenda to the next level and go and perform it. It's a green light. Every single country in the world has madmen. Every single country in the world has madmen, mad women, people that want to go and perform atrocities. But let's be honest, no other country in the world of the same magnitude as the US gives them the ability to go and pursue that. Gives them the almost just directly the word, the freedom to go and obtain these tools that can go and cause it. Are we insane? That we are a network that covers this, and then that's when I look at the Fox story and I go back to that again, and rather than connect the ties between all of these tragedies, what do they zone in on? Good old ISIS. Zone in on the ISIS part, because you know what that does? That clouds everything else.
It's a distraction.
It's a distraction away from the one sole common denominator, the weapons. The weapons, it's a common denominator, but instead, because of certain political values, they don't want to loosen their purse strings. They don't want to loosen the fact that they'll be able to lose out on certain, I would say, sources of income, because they don't want to focus on that. So rather than look at the common denominator, what's the easy option? We'll focus on ISIS, because then we'll get everyone riled up. We'll get everyone continuing to buy these weapons.
That's right. That paranoia fuels exactly what weapons manufacturers want. So the vicious cycle continues.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm going to do one final story that is not related to the shootings that occurred over the weekend. It's an update on a story that we covered quite a bit last week regarding Brock Turner. Okay. There are now reports indicating that rapist Brock Turner, who was sentenced to a measly 6 months in jail by a judge, had sent a photo of the victim to his friends, to his swimmer pals. The story is so disgusting. So, apparently he sent a photo of her breast, or allegedly sent a photo of her breast, to his friends via GroupMe, which is a messaging app. After Turner was arrested, he received a text via GroupMe that said, "Whose tit is that?" Turner appeared to have sent the photo with the message, "Bones." Police were unable to access the photo because somebody on the app deleted it. Any member of the group can delete a message on GroupMe. So, just to fill you in on some more details about this story, apparently what had happened is authorities had seen that on his phone. Anyone who has a phone knows, like, your smartphone will give you that notification, right? Whose tit is that? So that's what the cops saw. They can't just search his phone, so they obtained some sort of warrant in order to do it. In between that time, he was able to, or someone in the group was able to delete the photo. So we're not 100% sure if it was the victim's photo, but the timing seems interesting given that he had just been arrested for raping someone behind a dumpster as she was unconscious.
Man, this is just, it's tough stories to cover, all packaged into the one day, right? But I need to try and think as rationally as I can to try and understand. Right, so the argument that was put forward for this horrible human being, which is continuously regurgitated by his parents, inexperience with drinking, that's bullshit, because we already have seen them through those obtained text messages, continuously talking back and forth with his friends, talking about drug abuse, talking about drinking quite a lot. That kind of goes against the argument that he's a good standing student who just was inexperienced with drinking alcohol. So that argument can immediately be deemed as redundant. And then you talk about the fact that he is just in an environment that I would say allows him to carry out some of these actions, and he's able to go forth and do it without really thinking twice. And you look at the messages that he sent back and forth for the history. He has used the N-word on several occasions. He is not put forward as this good standing human being that his parents continuously put forward that there's a reason why he needs to be spared. And then his mother comes out and says that he's going to be ruined in jail. What else? What is it? What kind of argument is that to put forward? Look at the individual whose life is already ruined. Look at the individual whose life he ruined. And you're trying to put that forward as a case to free up his already minimal jail term? The fact that he could get out after 3 months on good behavior?
Yeah, it's incredible. And also, I mean, you see with the character testimony that his friends and family submitted to the judge before he got sentenced, that he lives in that privileged bubble where his behavior is enabled. But there are more and more people coming forward talking about their personal experiences with him, and it shows that he's not some, upstanding citizen who has never caused any harm or injury to anyone else. A search of his phone showed he often used the N-words in text to a high school friend. In an interview, a high school acquaintance, A.J. Burt, stated that he was really not delightful to be around. Burt, who is gay, said Turner repeatedly called him a faggot. So this guy is deplorable in more ways than one, and you don't just become a deplorable person. It's the environment that you're around and the people who enable you. And unfortunately, his family enabled him to be a piece of shit, and it's very likely that he not only raped someone who was unconscious behind a dumpster, it's likely that he took a photo of her body and sent it to a group of people.
Yeah, and speaking about enabling him, his friends, or whoever deleted this group me, should be ashamed of themselves. If it likely wasn't him, it seems like he was in custody at the time,
yes.
But whoever did delete that destroyed evidence, if that is truly what happened, and that is just another example of him living in this bubble that is becoming very clear, now that we've learned a little bit more about Brock Turner and his family, that his friends were no different, that they wanted to excuse his behavior, they wanted to cover up for him, and that sucks, and you are terrible for whoever deleted that group me. Just to have that evidence, to destroy that evidence, is terrible. And it's just,
they should be, I don't know whether or not GroupMe can retrieve deleted messages, but there should be a further investigation, because, if he's sending naked photos of the victim,
well, that shows that he doesn't feel any remorse. And that there's the difference between right and wrong. It doesn't exist for him anymore. He just doesn't see that. And he should be punished, and whoever, and his friends should be punished, because everyone that's come out that's been close to Brock Turner, they all kind of come out, and you're like, oh, it's just another piece of shit. And that's unfortunately what we're seeing. And
one of his female friends said, just because he raped doesn't mean he's a rapist. What the...
Yeah, so...
A rapist rapes people. That's what Brock Turner did. He is a convicted rapist. Again, the enabling adds insult to injury, and it's sick.
And you all look stupid you just look so stupid.
But he's been in an environment that people have gone out to protect him. He's been in an environment, as you mentioned, a bubble that has allowed him to act basically just on instinct, no matter what. And he's obviously at a very prestigious college, and he's on the swim team. He's been bigged up to be this big man on campus and do what he wants. And he literally acted upon that instinct, and as a result, you have people defending him on his good behaviour, on his good standing student, using the fact that he got into this college as one of your arguments. The fact that he's a Stanford student, so that means, you know what, he's upright, he's a good student, because you don't do that if you go to Stanford. No, the fact is that when you raise people within this bubble, when you raise them with values that I would say in a way, don't condone people for bad behaviour, literally just let them go about their business and do whatever they want, then there's going to be repercussions of it. And to say as an excuse that he won't survive in prison, and that this verdict has destroyed their family was destroyed long ago before that. and now you've destroyed another person's family due to the poor parenting before that.
All right, guys, that does it for today's show. If you're a member, stick around. We will be doing a post-game show for our members. For everyone else, I apologize for the sad, depressing, somber show, but that's the news that we had to deal with today. Have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow.